Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Melanin Margin, the weekly chat show where conversations about race are never off the table. We're your hosts, Quaviondre Williams.
And Daquon Wilson.
So let's get into this week's conversation. What's hot on the table this week?
In an article written by Josh Gerstein and Alexander Ward, we learned that the Supreme Court has voted to strike down the landmark Roe v. Wade decision. According to an initial draft, majority opinion written by Justice Samuel Alito, circulated inside the court and obtained by Politico. The draft opinion is a full-throated, unflinching repudiation of the 1973 decision, which guaranteed federal constitutional protection of abortion rights, and a subsequent 1992 decision, Planned Parenthood v. Casey, that largely maintained the rights. Roe was egregiously wrong from the start, Alito writes. We hold that Roe and Casey must be overruled, he writes in the document labeled as the opinion of the court. It is time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives. Deliberations on controversial cases have in the past been fluid. Justices can and sometimes do change their votes as draft opinions circulate and major decisions can be subject to multiple drafts and vote trading, sometimes until just days before a decision is unveiled. The court's holding will not be final until it is published, likely in the next 2 months. The immediate impact of the ruling, as drafted in February, would be to end a half-century guarantee of federal constitutional protection of abortion rights and allow each state to decide whether to restrict or ban abortion. It's unclear if there have been subsequent changes to the draft, however. So, Andre, that begs the question, what are your thoughts on the court's proposed ruling of returning the issue of abortion to state governments to either ban or restrict?
I think that people are starting to realize what marginalized communities have been saying for decades. And that is the fact that the federal government has never been on our side. People need to wake up and smell the racism, sexism, and homophobia that pumps through the system of America. I mean, what's happening right now in the Supreme Court is an organized attack on the federal protections of, human rights. I mean, regardless of your personal beliefs on abortion, bodily autonomy is a human right, and the government should not have the right to tell someone what they can and cannot do with their own fucking bodies. I mean, these pro-life people are so infuriating to me because they keep trying to argue that there are so many people who want to adopt and there's so much childcare available, yet they are the same ones who vote against assistance programs for struggling parents, free healthcare for all, and often don't have any adopted children of their own. I mean, these pro-lifers never want to discuss what would happen to the mental health of the people who are forced to have children because they were sexually assaulted, or have children who grow up feeling like horrible because they were a product of sexual assault. I mean, pro-lifers never want to discuss how those who actually carry babies undergo a life-threatening surgical process that could possibly end with their death. I mean, these people are so obsessed with quote unquote saving a life, but they only care about that one specific part of pregnancy, the birth. After that, they are nowhere to be found. Also, don't you think it's kind of funny how the same people who are so against abortions, usually Christian conservatives, are the same people screaming, "My body, my choice," at the top of their lungs when the mask mandate was up and vaccination cards required to enter certain events and stuff like that? It's giving very much hypocrisy to me. That's kind of what it's serving.
Very.
Then there's the fact that there are some people who don't understand the repercussions this overruling could have on the federal protections of so many other rights. I mean, even if you don't have a uterus, you should be fighting just as hard against this, because should they strike down the decision and return the legality of abortion to states, this will be far from the end of it. I mean, if you are a part of any marginalized community and you don't think that they are coming after your federally protected rights next, like gay marriage, interracial marriage, and so many others, you are sorely mistaken. I mean, people all are always saying things like, wait till the older generation dies off, and then all the bad things they did and said will go away. But baby, just because they died doesn't mean their hate died with them. I mean, if that was the case, racism, homophobia, sexism, all that other bullshit would have vanished decades ago. But it's still alive and well in 2022. I mean, the players change, but the bullshit bigotry remains the same. People need to realize just how insidious hate is and how it depends on people letting their guards down to strike. I mean, just because we've made some progress doesn't mean that we're done fighting. It just means we have to fight harder to maintain the rights we do have. I mean, people need to wake up and realize what's really going on around us. I think that's honestly what needs to be happening. But Daquon, I want to pass the question back to you. What are your thoughts on this bullshit?
Child, it was a really strange day having the Met Gala talking about the Gilded Age of America and hearing about this draft opinion leaking at the same time. It was really just so much going on. Like, you think, oh, the Supreme Court is trying to send us back to that Gilded Age where nobody has rights. And so many people were shocked, but people have been saying that this was going to happen for decades. And we know that this has been a strategic plan for Republicans because, frankly, they were losing steam. We know that in 2012 at a Republican convention, Senator Lindsey Graham said that in the demographics race, Republicans are losing badly and they're not generating enough angry white guys to stay in business for the long term. Because frankly, if we look at who votes Republican, the majority of their base is angry, racist, homophobic, sexist, all of the isms and phobias, white guys. And so it's very strategic to do something like ban abortions because if you haven't heard about it, there was this really important conservative book that was written called The Birth Dirt, which basically outlined how conservatives can kind of keep their power and keep a white majority in America. The three main things that they posit is one, paying people to give birth, because at that time, I think about 60% of all abortions were white women. So they had to give some type of incentive to increase the birth rate of white people in this country. But you can't just go out and pay people to have children because A, you don't want to spend that money. And B, with all of these already laws that are in place, you can't just pay white women to have babies and not pay people of other races to have children. The second thing that they could have done was have more white immigrants. But again, you can't really discriminate against all other immigrants and people of color from other countries. And so the third and, final thing that they posited was banning abortions. Like I mentioned before, 60% of the abortions at that time were white women. So if you ban abortions, that is 60% more people, more white children that can be brought up and turn into the angry white guys that the Republican Party needs. And we also know that, when it comes to the impacts of abortion and reproductive rights, that it's so necessary. It's so necessary for people of color because we know that when it comes to childcare and everything like that, people don't care about children of color. When we think about, the birthing process, people don't care about parents of color. That's why we have so many Black women and Black people with uteruses who die giving childbirth. And so for them, abortion is a way of protecting that parent, of protecting it, being like, well, there could be all of these complications during childbirth that could kill me as a parent. But of course, they don't want to hear that. They don't care because if black and brown people are dying from childbirth, but white women are getting less abortion and they're getting those angry white guys, that's all that matters. And so we also know that Roe was a landmark case for so many other things. Like you said before, this is not the end. This isn't going to be where they stop and be like, all right, we're done. We got Roe v. Wade. We're over. Because Roe gave a lot of precedent for things about somebody's right to privacy. So you can think about a lot of the, anti-sodomy laws that were on the books that kind of got overruled by Roe. That was basically like, as long as these are two consenting adults, we can't arrest gay people and homosexuals for having sex in behind closed doors because they have that right to privacy. There's also been a lot of laws about interracial marriages that have used the precedent of Roe. And we also know that there have been laws and precedent for contraceptives. And for me, I think contraceptives is their next target because if you're considering life begins at conception, you're going to get rid of any way to stop conception from happening. And so all of these different methods of birth control are going to go out the window because in this ruling, we see that they're like, oh, well, like adoption is an all perfectly fine alternative. And if they see adoption as an alternative, they're probably going to see abstinence as an alternative for all of these contraceptives. And so this is very strategic. It's giving very much, we need white people to run this country, and we don't want to become the minority because what if they do to us what we did to them? That would be crazy, right? And so I'm not surprised that this is happening. I don't know why people are so shocked. Well, it's because they don't listen to people of color, but that's a conversation for a different day. But I think that during this time, I'm not trying to, police emotions and feelings and
Yeah.
reactions because that's not my judge.
Yeah.
But I think that this is a time where we really need to think about things so much more. It's not just enough to be like, oh my gosh, the world is ending. This is crazy. Like Handmaid's Tale and like go crazy. Like have your moment, have your reaction because this is a very scary moment for a lot of people and that's valid. But also know that there have been so many reproductive rights organizations that have been saying that this was going to happen and that have been planning for this to happen. So do your research on reproductive rights organizations, see what they're saying, see what they're trying to do to create those protections for the people who need them. And donate your time, donate your capital, donate your energy for those causes. We also know that if something like this happens, yes, it's going to then go on to state representatives to decide whether abortion is legal or not in a state. And so this is why it's more important now than ever to pay attention to local elections. We all
Mm-hmm.
know that the federal government, there's so much going on up there.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be very disheartening to only focus on those federal big elections because there's so much gerrymandering and everything like that, voter discrimination and disenfranchisement, that federal elections are just crazy. But these local elections are what matters the most during this time. So really hold your elected officials accountable. Tell them, like, you need to take hard stances on this stuff. And also, I hear a lot of rhetoric that's just like, well, Trump had three Supreme Court justices that he nominated. Like, if you voted for Trump or you didn't vote for Hillary in 2016 or whatever, this is your fault. And it's like, we also have to expand upon that even more because there have been plenty of times when, Democrats could have voted to codify Roe v. Wade to prevent
Mm-hmm.
this from happening, but they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so This is more than just trying to cast the blame on somebody else and clean your hands. Like, this is the time to get your hands dirty, to hold people accountable, to let your voice be heard, and know that this is not going to stop who we are.
Yeah, I agree. I think that people really don't understand that this is no longer Trump supporters did this and da 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 did that. Honestly, at this point, you can point the fingers all you want, but that's not solving anything. That's not
Not at
fixing
all.
anything. That's not making any change. This is something that I think was planned for a while. Like it's an organized strategic attack. And it's specifically this particular case that they're trying to overrule because they know that once they do this one, if they can succeed on this, there is no telling what other rights they can take away now, or what other rights they can return to the state governments. Because let's not forget that, was it 13, Daquon, other states that don't say gay bill now, that there have other bills on the record like that? Yeah. This is organized. This is something that they're trying to return to state governments to decide, because they want to be like, okay, once we get Roe versus Wade out the way, then we can get that gay shit out the way. Then we can get that racism shit out the way. Then we can make a society that's completely surrounded around keeping white people safe and keeping white people from feeling bad and keeping straight white Christian people on the top. That's exactly what this is.
Exactly.